Pakistan, the third biggest Islamic state in the world. A nuclear power in a continually smouldering dispute with India and Afghanistan. A key player on the international arena in the battle between moderate Islam and radical fundamentalism. What direction will it take? Over 190 million people live in Pakistan, which makes it the sixth most populous country on the planet. It is also a very young society. The average age and life expectancy are respectively 22 and 66 years, with a high population growth rate. 45% of the population is illiterate. The people make up a very diverse ethnic mosaic, from Punjabis who hold the majority of administrative posts, through inhabitants of the largely agricultural Sindh province, governed by wealthy landowners, to Baluch and Pathans from the less accessible mountainous areas of the northwest, clans who live according to their own tribal laws. The glory days of territories that make up present-day Pakistan reach back 2.5 millennia before Christ, and the growth of cities that belong to the Indus Valley civilization, one of the most ancient in the world. Islam arrived here thanks to Arab traders and Persian conquests early in the 8th century, whilst in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Islamic Mughal Empire prospered in these areas. 100 years later, the East India Company began operating in India and gradually took control over a territory that subsequently in the 19th century became the British Raj, with Queen Victoria as Empress of India. The colonial period ended in 1947 with the breakup of the country and the creation of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan for India's Muslims. The dialogue with India remains a serious challenge for Pakistan's leadership. The dispute over Kashmir, unresolved since partition, has already resulted in 2 armed conflicts. The third war ended in 1971, with East Pakistan gaining independence as Bangladesh. Kashmir continues to suffer border skirmishes, and both countries are in possession of a nuclear weapon. The ongoing war in neighbouring Afghanistan is also proving destructive, whilst the official cooperation of the government in Islamabad with the United States does not add to the authorities' popularity amongst its citizens, especially the Pathans. "95% of Pakistanis are Muslim, of which 75% are Sunni and 20% Shia. Minority denominations, including Hindus, Christians and Sikhs, make up the remaining 5%. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan's founding father, was an English-educated, not especially religious lawyer. He aimed to create a secular state in which Islam was to have a unifying influence, a country with a multi-ethnic society, with equality before the law guaranteed for all citizens, irrespective of religious belief. The situation began to change in 1974 when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's government, in response to pressure from the religious right, recognized the minority Islamic Ahmadiyya community to be non-Muslim. Any signs of tolerance were finally buried in the 1980s by General Zia-ul-Haq's government, who formed an alliance with radical imams and conservatives in the military and subsequently introduced elements of Islamic Sharia law. In spite of its 65-year history, Pakistan continues to look for direction. The country has already survived several government and military coups, as well as the assassinations of high-level politicians. The showdown between those in favour of a secular government, preferred by the educated modern elite and elements in the armed forces, and fundamentalist Muslims wanting to create a religious state based on Sharia law, continues unabated. The northwest part of the country, comprising the tribal territories and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province governs itself in accordance with its own local laws. As a consequence, an unremitting civil war continues to be fought between government forces and the Pakistani Taliban, who support the Afghan Jihad and Al-Qaeda. The dispute over Islam's role in the political process deepens as a consequence of the Afghan war and becomes ever more radical. Terrorist bomb attacks, bloody riots, and targeted killings are the order of the day. Crimes involving financial corruption and the drug trade proliferate. Those who suffer most are poor Pakistanis and religious minorities: Shiite, Sikh, Hindu, and Christian.
From the beginning, we have been a very small minority, about 2%. And now the certain factors like the increasing of Islamic extremism and intolerance, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation. There have been attacks on churches, many cases of blasphemy, as a result of which there's been a lot of violence against Christians.
Accusations of blasphemous acts against the Prophet Muhammad or abuse of the Quran are not only directed at Christians. Muslims are even more impacted by the blasphemy law. But in the case of Christians, this law continues to be used as an instrument that not only legitimizes the elimination of individuals, but of whole Christian communities. Penalty for blasphemy is death, following hasty rulings in lower courts, based on fabricated evidence and pressure of local imams and an over-enthused crowd. Such sentences have so far been overruled by the Supreme Court, though the accused have to wait years in death cells for the court ruling, whilst their families are forced to run and hide despite the final acquittal. Chances of this misused law being changed are, under present circumstances, practically nil. Job discrimination, violence, as well as kidnappings, rape, and the forceful conversion of young women to Islam are further challenges that Christians, one of Pakistan's poorest and uneducated groups, have to cope with.
We are at a very critical point, and I'm talking on the level of Pakistan, in our history. We see this very strong trend of the, I use the word, extremist groups who have a very narrow interpretation of Islam and who would want to have a purely Islamic state. I'm talking about the extremist view which rejects democracy. I think that the majority of the Muslims in Pakistan are not thinking like this. They are very moderate Muslims, but the extremist forces seem to be gaining ground at the moment. Gaining ground not by winning the minds of the people, but by using forceful and violent tactics.